Welcome to Naked History. You're listening to Unearthed.
The mysterious ring fort of Trelleborg. An extraordinary monument built by a people who have faded into legend. The Vikings.
Trelleborg still has so many secrets. There's so much more we don't know.
The Vikings are famous for being marauding pirates who plundered without mercy. But why did their reign of terror come to an end? Now, new investigations could reveal the answer. Did this mighty fortress spark a revolution that changed the traditional Viking way of life forever?
They really do tell us an awful lot about the Viking society at the time.
And was the most famous and feared of all the Viking kings, Harold Bluetooth, behind the building of these magnificent forts? To uncover the Vikings' deepest secrets, we will deconstruct this great monument, layer by layer. We will dive inside its high walls and beneath the frozen ground to unearth the astonishing story of the end of the Viking Age. Trelleborg in Denmark is a mighty but mysterious medieval megastructure. An enormous circular fort built by a people whose name still strikes fear into the heart. The Vikings. More than 1,200 years ago, these legendary warriors terrorized medieval Europe, sailing from icy Scandinavia to raid and pillage. But Trelleborg's true purpose remains a mystery. Why did a people better known as seaborne raiders and traders build such a gigantic structure?
When people first found Trelleborg, they couldn't believe what they saw. It was nothing like what you expected from the Vikings.
At Trelleborg, almost 900,000 cubic feet of earth, stone, and clay make up nearly a third of a mile of 56-foot-thick earth ramparts. Just outside the walls lies a burial site with over 100 skeletons, some in mass graves. Clues suggest that 16 Viking longhouses sit behind heavily defended walls. So what exactly is Trelleborg? And why was it built? Trelleborg doesn't appear in any written records. Archaeologists didn't even realize it was a Viking structure until the 1930s.
It's really a fantastic and magnificent monument, Trelleborg.
Anne-Christine Larsen is Trelleborg's director. Until experts started digging here, it was thought most Vikings only lived in small farms and villages.
Trelleborg is a very unique site in many senses. It's nothing like the villages around.
Trelleborg looks like a simple structure, with ramparts made of earth and piled stones. But archaeologists like Anne-Christine can tell from detailed surveys that Trelleborg is a masterpiece of advanced engineering. A geometrically perfect circle, some 450 feet across, aligned to the compass.
It's quite clever, actually. Trelleborg has 4 gates, and they are pointed to the compass, meaning that one is pointed to north, one to the south, one east, one west.
Anne-Christine thinks Trelleborg showcases an astonishing new level of sophistication in Viking architecture.
1,000 years ago, when the Vikings built this fortress, they put out the ramparts very accurate, completely circular. And it's amazing that today we actually need this to do what the Vikings did without any equipment.
A ring is the perfect shape for a fortress with a clear line of sight from every point on the wall. But Anne-Christine suspects that Trelleborg's precise geometry goes far beyond what's needed for defense. This was designed to display prestige and power. So what exactly went on here? A clue might be hidden on the other side of these ramparts. Outside the Viking structure, archaeologists have uncovered a grisly surprise. 157 skeletons in a major Viking cemetery. Buried with one of the bodies are the remains of a massive battle axe adorned with intricate silver inlay, its blade over a foot long. In its day, this would have been a valuable and lethally effective weapon. But were all of the people buried here warriors? And can they reveal why Trelleborg was built? Today, the hundreds of bone fragments discovered at Trelleborg are locked away securely underground at the University of Copenhagen. Forensic anthropologist Niels Lunderup is trying to solve the mystery of what these warriors were doing here.
Having the bones really adds an extra dimension to what we know about Trelleborg.
The sheer number of bone fragments makes it difficult to work out how many individuals were buried at Trelleborg.
In this box here, for instance, it's clear that we have fragments of several of the limb bones, the long bones, and of the skull. Well, we really have only the mandible, see, with a couple of teeth in.
As he expects, most of the bones do appear to belong to young warriors.
There's very little abrasion on the third molar, which erupted when you're 18. At Trelleborg, we find more young males than we would do in, let's say, more ordinary village cemetery.
But what really shocks Niels are some of the other skeletons buried with these fighters.
Surprisingly, even though we have a lot of young males, this is an old individual, which can be seen again from the mandible. This is probably an old female, maybe 40, 50 years of age.
So why was a woman considered elderly for the time, living alongside a force of Viking soldiers? Niels believes she was part of an army of workers who supported the young warriors. Inside Trelleborg, archaeologists found parts of a loom revealing that skilled female weavers made cloth for tunics and cloaks. The people here also smelted raw materials into pure metals. Anvils found within Trelleborg reveal blacksmiths repaired weapons and forged new ones. This was a hugely sophisticated fortress, one of the most impressive in Northern Europe, built with incredible precision on an extraordinary scale. The Vikings' traditional way of life was raiding and fighting before returning home to tend to their farms. But these Vikings appear to be a garrison, stationed inside a permanent military base.
Probably be compared a bit to Roman camps in England. So again, I think it reflects sort of a military encampment where an army has been stationed for some time.
So why did the Vikings leave their isolated farms to build an enormous fortress? Could treasures buried beneath the ground reveal the secrets of how the Viking Age began? To understand their journey, we must rewind hundreds of years to the dawn of the Viking Age. Deconstructing the towering walls of Trelleborg reveals clues from decades before. The buried remains from a much older settlement. Ceremonial pits containing offerings thought to be to the Viking gods. A bronze bowl and pottery. But beyond the fortress walls, the earth also contains exotic objects from around the world. Silver artifacts, Arabic coins, and silver ingots. The Vikings got their hands on incredible riches from distant lands. Can these treasures help to explain the rise of this remarkable fortress? Archaeologist Søren Sindbak thinks that the journey from farmstead to fortress began here in Ribe, Denmark's first urban center.
It's the first place in Scandinavia, in the homelands of the Vikings, where there's something we would call a town.
Ribe is an archaeological treasure trove, a marketplace founded centuries before Trelleborg was built. The Viking Age began in the 700s when Scandinavians started to travel and trade. At first, they only moved within Northern Europe to places like Ribe.
This is in fact a piece of reindeer antler. And reindeer were not native to Denmark. You had to go far up into Norway to find this material. This was brought by somebody who came here in a boat and knew that this was a valuable material here to trade with.
But alongside these objects from Scandinavia, Søren finds relics and treasures from even more distant lands.
These beads were brought all the way from the Middle East to Ribe.
Could trade be the catalyst that changed society here and set the Vikings on a path to building fortresses like Trelleborg over 250 years later?
In order to put together trading expeditions like this, you need to build the boat, you need to produce all the trade goods that you're bringing. It brings together a whole society, so it takes a lot of organization. The interesting thing is that here in Ribe, we can see that just at the time that we usually say is the beginning of the Viking Age, the 790s, this is when we start to find this material from Norway.
This is because the first Scandinavian explorers were traders. But what turned them into the disciplined, fearsome warriors who built huge military structures like Trelleborg? A clue lies with the Vikings' longships. Built from dozens of trees, these boats were the most advanced vessels of their day. Longships were versatile. Designed with a very shallow keel, they could even be moved over land. They could traverse both shallow rivers and the deepest oceans, to take the Vikings everywhere from the Middle East to North America. But the longships were also perfectly adapted for warfare. Sailors on a trading mission could easily become an organized fighting force. Søren thinks the Vikings soon realized that they could simply take what they wanted. Each ship had a sailing crew of dozens of men, a small army of warriors.
Trading prepares the way for raiding. Once you have learned how to take a sailing expedition to a market, you can also use that knowledge for something else. You can go across the sea to do raiding.
The cooperation and organization required to build the fortresses was born at sea, as the Vikings became the most feared warriors in Europe. So why did this hugely successful way of life come to an end? Who was the powerful leader who united Denmark's independent Viking tribes to form a single fighting force? The Vikings. From the year 793, these rampaging warriors waged a campaign of terror that shook medieval Europe for over 2 centuries. But the fortress of Trelleborg reveals a whole new level of sophistication in military technology toward the end of the Viking era. So what or who dragged these fierce raiders out of the Dark Ages? Trelleborg is a military masterpiece. The Vikings reinforced the huge earth ramparts with wood to form a formidable barrier. On its outer face, a towering 26-foot-high oak palisade. In front of the ramparts, a 13-foot-deep ditch that could have been filled with sharp wooden stakes. Who had the power to construct such a formidable fortress? Could a clue lie buried inside these timber defenses? Archaeologist Nana Holm thinks that evidence lies not just at Trelleborg, but over 30 miles away. This is Borgring, a recently discovered ring fort with a striking similarity to Trelleborg. Nana and her team spotted it in aerial mapping data.
We were looking at maps and could see this perfect circle here. On the LiDAR maps, you kind of height measurement maps. And we start excavating here, and exactly where we thought it to be, we found the fortress.
Nana believes that the size and scale of both forts is so great that only a king could have built them.
It cannot just be a small family saying, oh, now we're going to build a fortress. It has to be something organized for united society to come together and build it with one organizer, the king.
Until now, most Vikings had lived in small, scattered villages. Which ruler was powerful enough to wrench them away from this old way of life? Nana thinks dating the artifacts and remains buried in the ground at Borgring could provide the answer.
The fortress here is placed just in the middle of the field, so every time the farmers plow the earth here, new finds will come up to the surface.
Nana has discovered fragments of wood from Borgring's timber defenses. She works with dendrochronologist Aoife Daly to date them. Aoife thinks the wood samples could reveal when Borgring was built, and if so, which ruler was in charge.
So this is from the north gate, and it is burnt, but it's very brittle, very fragile.
This wooden fragment was actually part of Borgring itself. Could the age of the fort be hidden inside? Aoife starts by hunting for rings in the wood. A ring represents a year's growth in the life of a tree.
What I think I can see, before I get it under the microscope, is rings right there. You can see there's little ridges. So I'm going to take off this chunk here.
Aoife can calculate the year in which ancient trees were cut down.
Here we go.
By measuring these rings and comparing them to those from other trees. But she struggles to get a clear reading from this Borgring fragment.
But as you can see, it's very fragile and flaky. I can't get a reliable sequence of tree rings because I need an uninterrupted measurement.
This sample of wood is too damaged to date precisely. But Aoife has managed to date another piece found at Borgring and matched it to wood found at Trelleborg.
As you can see that where one has a narrow ring, the other one also has. In this case, I find that it matches very well with the Trelleborg material.
It's just one sample, but the implications are huge. It suggests both Borgring and Trelleborg date to the same era, the late 900s AD, the reign of Denmark's most famous Viking king. The first Viking rulers were great war leaders who drew in warriors with the promise of plunder. But they often failed to inspire lasting loyalty. Their success depended on their fortunes in battle. But just over 1,000 years ago, one warlord stamped his authority over Denmark, a king known as Harald Bluetooth. Bluetooth ruled Denmark from 958 AD. He's famous as the king who popularized Christianity among the Vikings. But he was also a ferocious warrior and relentless conqueror, determined to expand the Viking kingdom. These forts were certainly impressive enough for such a powerful ruler. But the date alone doesn't prove that Harald built them both. So Nana and her team scour the soil beneath Borgring. Each year brings new discoveries: metal artifacts, beads, and tools. But the most beautiful and intriguing is a piece of Viking jewelry.
It's a small silver fitting from a box brooch.
This is a fragment from an ornate silver casket. Incredibly, what could be the rest of the artifact was discovered almost 150 miles away at yet another ring fort.
This small silver fitting proves to us that one person who was in another fortress also was here in Borgring. And for the first time, we know now that they really moved from fortress to fortress.
This brooch was found in the grave of a woman with other artifacts that indicate she could be a priestess or fortune teller. Perhaps she served as an advisor to King Harald, traveling with him as he visited his forts.
This tells us the story of Harald Bluetooth and how he moved around all the country from fortress to fortress.
All the evidence points in the same direction. The great king Harald Bluetooth built both the Trelleborg and Borgring fortresses. This ruler, who had designs on conquering much of Scandinavia, was also building big back home in Denmark. But mystery surrounds the fort's sudden appearance. Why did he construct them in these specific locations? And how did Harald Bluetooth unite the Viking tribes into an organized fort-building society? Decades before Trelleborg was built, armies of Viking warriors invaded the established military kingdoms of medieval Europe. So did these overseas invasions inspire King Bluetooth to build his own fortresses at home? Archaeologist Kat Jarman investigates a Viking site in England. Could a clue to Trelleborg's origins be found here?
So this is the 25 centimetre grid, so we're going to get better resolution.
Kat has come to the grounds of a medieval church in Repton. She combines geophysics, a kind of radar, with drone footage to investigate the remains of an early Viking army.
In the recent excavations, we found some more evidence of that Viking presence. We don't quite know what or how, but in this trench, we found evidence, artifacts that we can clearly link with the Viking great armies.
Archaeologists have discovered hundreds of skeletons here. Warriors from a great Viking army that invaded Anglo-Saxon England in the mid-800s, more than a century before Trelleborg was built.
England was a great destination, so many riches. Some of them easy pickings, it seemed, monasteries. There's a lot of wealth here that is quite easily obtainable by an army.
Chronicles say that the Vikings captured this important royal church and built a fortress around it.
What we're looking for here is some kind of defensive ditch or rampart or something like that that encloses a central space and keeping it safe.
The radar picks up what looks like a massive earthwork around the church. Just like Trelleborg, the camp looks big enough to have protected hundreds of warriors.
Well, we'll go and have a look. We'll get it on the computer and then we can see.
So what we're looking at now, this is the plot of what we've been finding with the radar in the garden here. So we've put that all with the drone shots as well. This is showing to us that there's a lot more going on. The camp is much bigger than what we previously thought. It could correspond to a much bigger group and a much bigger army.
But this camp seems too rough and ready to be a prototype for Trelleborg.
This is very much a base where you're staying over the winter, perhaps plundering the surrounding areas for food and resources and making equipment, making weapons ready for that next big attack.
The Vikings were experts at building quick temporary camps like the one here at Repton. But ultimately, these early military bases weren't enough for the Vikings to conquer England completely. Their enemies, the English, used a superior military strategy, which may have inspired King Bluetooth. To defeat the Vikings, the English fortified many of their towns, calling them burhs. They spaced them all out equally to make it easy for any one burh to call for reinforcements. After decades of raids, battles, and skirmishes, the network of fortified burhs helped to end the Vikings' reign of terror in England. The Vikings returned home to Scandinavia. Over time, fortresses begin to appear across the Danish landscape. Did the experience of being beaten in England teach the early Viking armies a lesson that their descendants never forgot?
I think you can definitely draw some comparison with what you're seeing later in Denmark with the building of the ring fort. It's very possible that we have these same people who have been observing this strategy of building these burhs that's being taken back to Denmark. Perhaps that could be traced back to seeing these early fortifications here in England.
The Vikings brought home more than just plunder. Their failure taught them a valuable lesson. A single military base is no match for a network of organized fortifications. Now, archaeologists want to find out if Trelleborg and Borgring are just separate individual outposts or part of a network of interconnected defenses. And did this painful defeat for the Vikings inspire Harold Bluetooth to mastermind a nationwide military strategy decades later? After 100 years of terror, the Vikings suffered a monumental defeat. The English finally discovered how to fight off the Viking hordes, thanks to their chain of impressive fortifications. So more than 100 years later, did this failure inspire the Viking ruler, King Harold Bluetooth, to build forts of his own? And can they also reveal why the age of the marauding Viking warrior came to an end? Archaeologist Soren Sindbeck thinks Harold not only built the great ring forts, he planned them as part of a single modernizing military strategy.
What's really special about Trelleborg is the fact that everything is so perfectly laid out, and this is what we were looking for here as well.
He believes all the fortresses followed Trelleborg's distinctive shape and design. Trelleborg isn't just a perfect circle. Even its wooden buildings are placed in a precise order. Evenly spaced holes in the ground reveal the location of sturdy timber posts. Curved planks laid out in the shape of a ship's hull support a heavy roof covered by a layer of wooden shingles. A longhouse is the heart of the traditional Viking community, but here there are 16, arranged in 4 perfect squares, enough room to house hundreds of warriors. So did Bluetooth roll out this design across Denmark, mimicking the English kings who defeated his ancestors. If Soren's suspicions are right, then the fortress at Borgring should be a mirror image of Trelleborg.
We're basically out in the middle of nowhere. We're between a farm's field and a highway. This is not where you'd expect to find something important from the Viking Age.
He carries out a geophysical survey to investigate the fortress at Borgring.
But we need to cover about 200 meters, 100 meters that direction, and then 100 meters over to that direction.
Scanning this 140-acre site is a huge challenge.
Just go down and see if you can turn around. Perhaps you can go into the plow field and come back to the top. Yeah.
Using this cutting-edge technology, Soren is able to watch the results of the survey come through. A Viking fort emerges after 1,000 years.
This is really one of the most fascinating things about archaeology, when you're there and you see something that's not been seen before, nobody's seen it before, and you see it coming out of the ground or on your screen as it happens.
But is Borgring identical to Trelleborg?
We need to cover every bit of the ground. We're starting to see patterns of what is buried here, and we can see that there's some structure. In the middle of the map that's coming here, I can see a great big ring. It looks perfectly circular from what I can see here.
The radar doesn't pick up any buildings inside the fort, but to Soren, the circular monument that emerges from the earth is strikingly similar to Trelleborg.
Borgring is a perfectly circular structure with 4 gates in the 4 corners of the compass. It looks amazingly like Trelleborg, just like the same structure. We're almost 50 miles from Trelleborg, and here's something that looks so very similar, and that's what's so fascinating about this place.
Soren believes that the only explanation for their similarity is that both sites were built to a specific plan. So why stop at 2? Today, archaeologists have discovered no less than 6 remarkably similar fortresses.
All of these sites, Trelleborg, Borgring, and the other ring fortresses, they all follow the same pattern. There must be a very close connection.
So how did this series of forts work? Harald Bluetooth ruled a scattered empire. His influence extended into the fjords and valleys of modern-day Denmark, Norway, and even northern Germany. Very few structures survive from the Viking Age, but Trelleborg's distinctive shape stands out in the landscape. Archaeologists believe the other handful of forts discovered across Denmark share this same intriguing design. Each fort is found near the coast. Borgring appears to plug a gap between them. Soren thinks this newly discovered fort reveals Harald's master plan: to secure Denmark with a chain of almost identical forts, linking fortified towns all within fighting distance of each other.
The ring fortresses are not just individual places for hiding out. They're spread out as a network across different provinces. So they're about controlling, they're not just about hiding. And that's the idea which the Vikings borrowed from the English.
A huge coordinated effort was needed to build these forts. They signify how Viking society had changed.
There's massive amounts of people being organized in these places, not just organizing for building them, but actually organized for manning them, defending them. They were all working like one big machine. It's something we absolutely don't associate with the Vikings.
But if Harald did build all these forts, why did he embark on such a costly and ambitious enterprise? Were the fortresses designed to show off his power and sophistication to his own people? Or were the Vikings themselves under threat? The Viking fortress of Trelleborg is the most impressive in a series of military bases that appear to date to the reign of Denmark's greatest king, Harald Bluetooth. But their sudden appearance just over 1,000 years ago puzzles archaeologists. Were these structures merely designed to show off the king's power to his subjects, or to keep out his enemies? The answer may lie buried in the fortress itself. Hidden inside Trelleborg are clues that hint at savage battles. The fort was a formidable obstacle. Strong wooden gates provided the only way in or out. And to make life worse for attackers, a roof turned the gates into a kill zone. But arrowheads unearthed at the scene provide evidence of an assault. Charred timber suggests these gates were once burned to the ground. And 130 feet from the southern gate, archaeologists discovered the only Viking shield ever found in Denmark. Could this lost shield reveal who was fighting who at Trelleborg, and even why the fortress was built? The final piece in the puzzle could lie hundreds of miles away in the frozen fjords of Oslo, Norway. Vegard Vika is one of the world's leading experts on Viking weaponry. For him, the discovery of the Trelleborg shield is rare and exciting.
The Trelleborg shield seemed to be just a loose find or a throwaway, and that it was preserved is quite unique.
Most Viking weapons are found in graves. These great warriors were so attached to their axes, swords, and shields that they even held on to them in death.
The weapons were the tools of the warrior, both in life and in afterlife, it seems.
In his laboratory, Vegard carefully restores metal weapons like swords, axes, and Viking helmets. But among his most rare finds is a simple wooden shield from a Viking ship discovered here in southern Norway.
So this is one of the shields from the Gokstad ship burial.
What makes this shield remarkable is that its construction appears to be almost identical to the shield found back at Trelleborg. Despite being found 260 miles away.
Usually when we have Viking Age graves, we usually only have this metal boss. The rest is gone. But in this unique grave find, we have a lot of organic material preserved. So we have these fabulous shields almost complete.
The preservation of this shield is truly special. Its wooden planks are more than 1,000 years old.
This shield from Gokstad is very similar to the Trelleborg shield. It's built up from 7 or 8 planks in the same way. The planks have more or less the same thickness as the Trelleborg shield. They are both a little bit less than a centimeter thick, and they're both made from very light types of wood. The Trelleborg shield from pine and this one from spruce.
Vegard can tell that both shields may well have come from the same place.
The analysis of the wood from the Trelleborg shield show that the wood was actually from Norway. These two shields are so similar that one could possibly think that they could have been made by the same workshop, or at least in the same tradition.
If Vegard is right, how did a Norwegian shield end up at Trelleborg in Denmark?
The people in the army of Trelleborg could have been brought together by people from various places. The Trelleborg shield could be viewed as evidence for Norwegian warriors being at Trelleborg.
So was the Trelleborg shield carried by a Norwegian warrior? Perhaps a mercenary fighting for King Harald? The answer could lie with some of the skeletons buried at the fortress. Analysis of their teeth reveals that many of the young warriors buried here aren't Vikings from Denmark. They grew up in modern-day Norway, far to the north, or in the Baltic Sea regions. These men traveled hundreds of miles to fight at Trelleborg. As Harald Bluetooth grew in power, he also seized the throne of Norway. But as his Vikings settled down, they became targets. The Trelleborg shield could be evidence that Vikings from all over Scandinavia were banding together to fight off common enemies under Harald Bluetooth. a new picture emerges of the crucial role that these fortresses play in Viking history. Trelleborg reveals how under Harald Bluetooth's rule, Viking society in Denmark became united under a single national identity.
Trelleborg was built at the time where the king was unifying the whole country. For the first time, we had a king, which was king over both Denmark and Norway.
Centuries of organization, trade, and warfare brought the Vikings to this point. The forts prove that these warriors became far more than just the marauding pillagers of legend.
I think what especially we are appreciating now is that the Viking Age is not all about the men, it's not just about the violence, it's very much to do with contacts, networks, trade, a lot of culture, art, and so on. So it's a much more complicated and nuanced picture than what we typically think about when we think about the Viking Age.
By building Trelleborg, Harald Bluetooth laid down the blueprints for modern-day Denmark. But in doing so, he also ushered in the end of the independent, daring Viking warrior.
They are built in a time where Denmark also wants to show the rest of Europe that we are one nation. So they're really taking us into modern society, showing that we can do this and we stand together as one people. So they are really also the symbol of the end of the Viking era.
Trelleborg reveals a little-known chapter in the history of these legendary people. From their origins as independent traders and pirates, the Vikings banded together, united under the leadership of Harald Bluetooth. This newly coordinated force built a network of vast earthworks with formidable walls and enormous longhouses. Unlike anything else in Europe, Trelleborg was the crowning glory of a newly modernized military nation. But it's also a testament to a dying way of life. The end of the Viking Age.
Naked History is brought to you by Element 18. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a comment below and subscribe to our channel for new videos every week.